Episode 26 of the New England Sports Media Podcast. Got a band of brothers here on the New England Sports Media Podcast. Jeff and Taylor Mannix, co-hosts of the Big Jab Saturday in Portland, and also work for the Red Claws and other variety of sports aspects. Jeff, also the broadcaster for Maine men's hockey, among other things, and my former intern boss, sort of, with the Portland Pirates. How's it going, guys?
Going well, Greg and Liam. Thanks for letting us join you.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. So, the main thing that you guys do now, at least together, is the Big Jab Saturday, where I am now become a regular caller to message about the Celtics. But I want to start before you got there. Can you guys just give us a quick run through of where you've been at before that?
I'll let Jeff start because he's got a list.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, my first professional job was in 2000, so it was right after it was my sophomore year of college. When I was at the University of Maine, I started working at WZON radio in Bangor, which used to be an all sports radio station. Now it's basically an oldies station, but that's where I kind of cut my teeth. Did a lot of high school sports, a lot of small college sports there, some University of Maine there. Most of my UMaine initial experience was at WMEB, which is something Taylor and I share in common, the college radio station up at the University of Maine. From there, I went to the Lewiston Maniacs, broadcast 3 years there, both television and radio. Then I got out of hockey for a little while, went to the West. Well, not really the West Coast, Washington State. I was like 5 hours from the coast, but closer to Idaho. I did high school sports, some college sports out there too, and then came back for the Portland Pirates job and started broadcasting American Hockey League games there. And now I do UMaine hockey amongst a lot of work for the Big Jab. I do tons and tons of things at the Big Jab.
For me, it was a little bit different. When I got out of high school, we went right to the military. I served in that. Had a little fun, I guess you could say, doing that thing, getting my butt in shape for a couple of years. Once I got out there, I decided that I wanted to go to college. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time, but I remember that, seeing with my brother and especially my father, Kevin Mannix, who I think a lot of people know, seeing that path just seemed like one that was interesting and intrigued me. And so just like my brother mentioned, WMEB was a spot that I gravitated to when I got to the University of Maine. And I actually became the sports director there. My brother was the station manager when he was there. I never got to that level, but, I made it to the sports director there for 2 years. I worked with ESPN Plus, a guy named Sam Hallett, who is the digital director up there, man. Hats off to him. I still talk to him now. He's a great guy, incredible at what he does. He had me doing soccer, field hockey, football. I mean, you name it, women's basketball, everything. I was doing broadcasts for ESPN Plus on that note for them. And it was so fun and such a good experience. And then once I finished up there, I came down here and I was lucky enough to start the Big Jab. And for a year, I was just kind of sitting around as I feel like just another guy in the studio, kind of like, no offense to Lou, but just like Lou, you know what I mean? Just kind of pushing buttons and, not doing a lot. And then I got the message from my brother one day and said, hey, we had a meeting and how would you feel about coming on the Saturday show and starting that off? And to this day, I'm so happy we did it because I think it's something special. And obviously I got a lot way to go in my career before I get to where Jeff accolades are, but I think getting off on the right foot and I'm looking forward to continuing to grow, and having him as a role model is incredible. I mean, you heard what he's done, and just being able to see and learn from someone like that has helped me exponentially. I can't even express that enough. So I'm very lucky to be in the family I'm in and have the ties to learn the proper way to be a sports journalist.
Yeah, absolutely. For the record, Kevin Mannix, our dad, is a former retired weatherman.
He's a 50-50 man. That's what we call the weatherman.
So guys, I'm curious. I kind of want to take this conversation a couple of different ways. First, let's talk about your Saturday show. Before you guys, I don't know if there's someone in between, but it was Mike Antonellis, who was the Sea Dogs radio broadcaster. And then I don't know, was there someone in between before you guys took it over or no?
No, it was me taking over initially from Mike, and that was basically his decision. I'd been filling in the 2 previous summers for him because he, doing his Sea Dogs games, and I was doing the Pirates, so usually there was not a whole lot of overlap. So whenever his season started, I could just go in and fill in during the summers, and then he would take it back again in the fall. But once he started working full time for the Sea Dogs again, he decided he didn't want to do that anymore. So I got the show full time at that point, and that was right about the time the Pirates left town too. Right. So that was fortuitous timing for me because I was able to kind of pick right up with something else after losing that opportunity. So I did it on my own for a little while, and then really why I wanted to bring my brother in was because I thought it would be a unique sound, number one, but the other was I had just gotten the University of Maine television job, which was going to require a lot of weekends up in Orono. So I needed, I think, another consistent voice to host the show besides me for the days that I knew I wasn't going to be there over the winter. And I couldn't think of a better person than my brother, who was already in sports media, and I thought it was going to be something a little bit unique. I haven't really done a whole lot of research, but I don't know about very many brother combinations that there are in sports radio. So I just kind of thought it was a neat thing to do, and I'm glad that the bosses, John Van Hogenston and Shu at Atlantic Coast Radio, decided that was a good thing to do. And I personally think the show has gotten so much better since Taylor's joined it. It's added a different element to it. Taylor is younger than everybody else at the Big Jab, so I think it brings that more younger perspective into sports radio that I think has been lacking a little bit. And I'm glad that we provide it and have a little bit different listenership than the weekday shows, which are also great. But we're just kind of trying to do something a little bit different, and I think we're succeeding at that.
So if you guys were to explain like what the Big Jab is to someone who's not from Portland, how would you introduce it?
Oh man, I would definitely say it's better than WEEI.
I would
100%.
I haven't listened. I would 100% agree.
I would describe the Big Jab as unique in one sense. I think you have such a variety of personalities. If you listen to the morning show, what Shu and Joe were able to put together, and then you have Javier and Chris Sedanka, who are incredible personalities in their own. They do their own Brute Strength podcast, and then of course you bring us on Saturday, and as you mentioned, we do something different. Like we do soccer. We do a lot more local stuff than some of the guys during the weekdays. So I think with the Big Jab, you're just getting such a variety of sports that you don't get anywhere else. I mean, where else are you going to be able to hear the Wayne Fleet soccer coach having a conversation about them taking down Class A giants? You're not going to get that anywhere else but on the Big Jab. So I think that's what it brings. I think it's something different. And I think it's really cool that people are able to kind of come to the Big Jab and get that information, and rather than going to a place like EEI, and that's what I think it is for me. I'm not sure for Jeff, but to me, it's the ability to have so many different personalities and so many different things going on that it's for anybody.
Yeah, and the great thing is we all work together well. I mean, I think we all do, kind of different things. We all have our own personalities, but everybody that's on a show on the Big Jab brings their own piece to the puzzle. I think it's a good mix. And, besides the live shows that we do, Red Sox baseball, Celtics basketball. It's amongst the other stations, NFL football, University of Maine sports, hockey and football and men's basketball are on one of the sister stations in the group. So it's a big variety of sports that we cover, and it's really fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. I will say too, sorry to interrupt, but just to add to, again, to hammer down on working well together, again, everybody there, we're all friends. I text Dennis, yep. You know what I mean? We are all legitimately good friends. It is a really, really good environment to work in, man.
So obviously, everyone knows what someone who's on the air is, but when you have a Red Sox game, a Celtics game, for people who don't know, what are you doing? What are you doing? What is your role?
Making sure the stream kind of doesn't have any hiccups. I know my brother's more on like the engineering side of that stuff. You could probably explain a little better, but basically, I mean, for me, I do a lot of my like show stuff. Like for instance, we have the show Saturday, I'm in there for a Red Claws game. Obviously you're doing notes because you have to do the halftime show, but it's also a chance where you can actually really go into some stats and sit there and be a nerd and break down box scores and write stuff down and really kind of just dive in. So for me, I use those opportunities along with, producing obviously, but I use those opportunities a lot of times to kind of educate myself and what's going on around leagues and things like that, dive deeper into little things.
Yeah, a lot of the time when we're just there for say a Red Sox game, it is literally making sure that the commercials run in the right spots. That's pretty much the gist of it. But when it's when you're doing other stuff that's more local, the Maine Red Claws stuff, for instance, that's a little bit more in depth because you're making sure commercials run at the same time, but you're also putting together those that pregame, that postgame show, that halftime show that you need to do on air. And yeah, I mean you're researching for that. You're also kind of watching everything else that's going on to provide the best update that you can in the moment, and try to cover as many things as I can. I know that's at least what I do when I'm there, and for the most part on the Red Claws broadcast, that's me that's in the studio. I'm the executive producer of the radio broadcasts as well on the radio network, which the Big Jab is the flagship station for, and that's a fun gig that I've had since the Pirates left town too. So it's been kind of nice to be on that side of things, on the real producer side of things. And, it's a different aspect of the job than play-by-play. And I like that aspect too, because you get to kind of do everything behind the scenes and, pick the music that's on the broadcasts, pick your, kind of everything that goes into it, all the elements of it. And that's kind of a neat thing too, that at least I do as part of the Red Claws radio team. That's the most involved I am in anything other than the show at the station, and probably the most time consuming thing besides the show that I do there.
So now, like, when you turn to your show every week, like, how are you guys planning it out? Do you have like a Google Doc? Are you throwing ideas by each other? Is it by out? Like, are you planning out? I know you have like your soccer 30 and stuff, but like, are you planning? Is it every hour the same thing? Like what goes into the show planning? How does it work? How do you put together your show every weekend?
Well, a lot of it, man, it's actually pretty simple. Well, that's the blessing of having your brother doing it. We think very much alike. Usually it'll be funny. We'll kind of text each other throughout the week. And how it'll go is either I'll text him something or he'll text me something, and we'll already be thinking about it, which is like kind of funny how that works. And we'll be like, oh, I actually had that same idea. Well, like when we ran back our best of show from yesterday, he texted me the list and was like, what do you think? I'm like, well, literally everybody I had on my list is on your list. So perfect. Like, let's run with it. And so I think that's one of the lucky things of working with your brother is you have that connection. You have the understanding. You kind of already know what to expect going into it because we're kind of in each other's minds in that sense. And for the Soccer 30, my brother, hats off to him. He makes a sheet every single week. Like, I'm dead ass, like 15 pages, every league, goals. I mean, whatever you need to know, it is a cheat sheet for soccer. And that preparation that he does that goes into that helps us put that together. And I think the Soccer 30 has come so far from when we started it and what we originally had in mind for it. And like, to be honest, that's like my favorite thing that we've been able to create on the Big Jab Saturday is that in the preparation that goes into that. It's like hats off to my brother who does that. We both sit there, and I know for a fact we're watching highlights every day from every league all the time. So the preparation that goes into alone the Soccer 30, I know is hours throughout the week. But for the most part, when it comes to, I think, the whole lineup, I mean, we just flow. And I think that we're lucky enough that we kind of have that ability to, because we're brothers. That's just kind of the way it goes with that stuff. You kind of know what each other's thinking. At least for me.
The soccer is pretty sick because, like, especially like in Boston, all these stations, like you would never have like a soccer period on a show. Like, I think it's pretty awesome that you guys do that.
Yeah, and honestly, I felt like it was an audience that's completely underserved in in sports radio. And that's part of the reason why I felt like it was a good idea to do the segment. Taylor and I were just talking about the genesis of it not long ago. And, you know, for him, it was just a way to talk soccer on the radio for 30 minutes and kind of do something fun. For me, this really was something that I thought could kind of take off as a segment and as a part of the show, and bring a different listening audience element into it, because soccer is the most popular sport in the world. No, it is not the most popular sport in the United States, but it continues to gain popularity every single year. There are, you know, some of the richest people in sports that are investing in the sport here in the United States. And it's growing by leaps and bounds. More kids play the sport than ever before. And I think more people, certainly of Taylor's age, now can, you know, kind of watch more soccer than people my age did. There's an 11-year age separation between the two of us. So I know I came up in a generation that really bashed soccer. Taylor was in a generation, I think, that more accepted it a little bit more as a mainstream sport. So, and I think that's only going to continue to grow, especially once it looks like we're going to get a professional soccer team here in Portland, with all the work that Gabe Hoffman Johnson and the folks at Portland, you know, USL to Portland are doing. I think really when we started, it was the right time to do it and kind of build up that anticipation for a local pro team, but also build up anticipation for more and more soccer being around and more and more people being interested in it, because as there's more and more soccer on television, because there's going to be, we see not only, you know, English Premier League and La Liga and Serie A, but we see women's leagues too. I mean, the you know, the NWSL has games on CBS now on Saturday afternoons, and a lot of times there's you know, women's English Premier League games on NBCSN on days the English Premier League aren't playing. So there's more and more, and there's more and more women's soccer too. And I think it was important to capitalize on that and kind of get ourselves out front for when soccer really kind of takes off, which I think it will within the next half a decade or so. And I think really when it's going to happen is in 2026, when the United States hosts a World Cup with Canada and Mexico. And it's literally going to be the biggest thing on the sports landscape for a month or a month plus at that point. And that's when I think a lot of people are going to get roped into it, especially if the United States does well. And we've got a good crop of young players, and I think we can do really, really well come 2026.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. You mentioned like the NWSL, like even like some of the investors who have been putting money into that, like some of the biggest athlete names in America. So it's definitely growing.
No doubt about it. You know, it seems like a lot of those NWSL teams do have, you know, some real big investment. I'm kind of looking forward to the new side that's going to come in there, Angel City, which has, you know, Mia Hamm is one of the owners, and a lot of people there that will be playing in Los Angeles. And I'm looking forward to that, because I do think the league is growing, and it is kind of fun to see all these U.S. women's national team players not only playing in that league, but also playing overseas as well, because so many of them have gone to either, you know, England or France to play for women's organizations over there kind of in the off season, because we do the seasons opposite of Europe. Basically, they take the summer off. We play during the summer and take the winter off. So it's, you know, kind of the seasons don't overlap, but it allows them all to kind of play year round if they want to. And that's kind of a neat thing. And I do think that the league's growing, and just looking at the ratings from CBS, they had some, you know, for women's soccer, they had some really good ratings. I think it was higher than a lot of people expected.
Yeah, and it also kind of mirrors like the WNBA too, like with their popularity and in Maine. I know I've told Liam about this a lot. Like women's basketball in Maine is a really big deal. Like the UMaine program has had a long lineage of great players. Of course, like Sydney Mauset's the one everyone's heard of, but women's basketball here is a big deal too, and a lot of players are doing well in college. And I kind of want to take that as a little bit of a segue, because something that you guys talked about at the beginning, kind of what makes the Big Jab different, and I think what makes you guys different is you talk about local sports. No, I'm not trying to throw shade to the other people at the Big Jab, but I'm not, me personally, I'm not interested in hearing about from some Broncos like beat writer or something. And a lot of people are, but like that's not me. And like, so I'm curious, like, how you guys find the balance between getting stuff like your soccer stuff, your pro stuff. You do hit on all the pro stuff, but also getting the local sports. Like, how do you do all that? How do you find to fit it in, and what value do you place on it?
I think there's a huge value on it. I think one thing that we talk about all the time after the show, before the show, is how we need to continue to push local, especially women's basketball in this state. I mean, you look what Mackenzie Holmes is doing. I think we're going to get pretty close to talking about her going to the WNBA if she continues to progress in the way she is in the next couple of years over at Indiana. Obviously, a little bit away from that, maybe a hot take, but the way she's playing, I mean, she had 19 points the other night in a win. It's just incredible to see how a player of that caliber is doing. Anna DeWolf as well. Unbelievable statistics that they're putting up. And I think that's where the importance is how can you not talk about that? And I know, not even to call it our own show, but kind of a lot of other people around the state. I feel like if Mackenzie Holmes is dropping 19 points, that needs to be primetime news on WMTW or on Channel 6, and it's not. And it kind of sucks to see that, because I agree. I think there is a lack of that, and I hope that what we do on our show is bring that to light a little bit. But I think it is unfortunate there's a lack of that, and I do wish there was more pressure on the local media to go find those highlights, to contact IU and get in touch with these people to continue to promote local. Because again, the fact that it's almost like a blind eye, I don't want to say a blind eye, but there's definitely not as much attention being given to the subject that should be. I mean, it blows my mind that I'm not watching Mackenzie Holmes highlights every night on local news when she's playing. That's what it does for me. I don't know about Jeff, but again, like for me, the importance on local it's right at the top. It's up there with soccer, in my opinion. That has to be up there. Obviously, like you said, we talk about professional sports, but for me, local sits like number one, because I think that's how can you not promote what's going on in your own community and push for that to better and maybe even inspire other kids to continue to push and strive for those goals.
Yeah, Taylor and I agree on that, and I come from from a radio station, my first place, WZON, which was a hyper local station. I mean, yes, they talked the Red Sox, and they were the Red Sox station up in Bangor, and they had Bruins and Celtics, and they literally pretty much had every sports property you could have. But the main thing we were doing, and I'm not kidding, especially during basketball season, every single night of the week, we had a high school basketball game on or a high school hockey game on. And that kind of, being in that hyper local, coverage area. And Bangor is a very unique market for sports because UMaine's right there. But I mean, high school basketball is such a big deal. And I remember the first thing that really kind of jump started my interest in, hey, there's bigger, there's sports more locally than just the professional and college sports that I was watching, was as a kid being able to watch the Maine high school basketball tournament on MPBN. And, literally just during school vacation, sitting in front of the television and being able to watch a Class D girls high school basketball game in a morning on a Monday or something, I thought was the coolest thing ever. And it helped me not only learn about sports locally, but it helped me learn about my state, because then I could look up where all these places were, where all these communities were, and learn a little bit about them. And I've kind of always had that instinct in me. I want to be able to tell those stories, especially the ones that are really interesting, be it, Forest Hills basketball, the Class D team that seems like they can't lose now. I want to be able to tell a story like that because, it's about the biggest thing going on in Jackman, Maine. And, other than that, they don't get a whole lot of coverage for anything. So if we can provide something that's going to be good for that community and be able to showcase what's going on, I think that's a good thing. And that's something that I've always kind of really wanted to do from, and I've kind of lived all over the state a little bit. I was born in northern Maine, grew up in Bangor. Now I'm living in Lewiston. I've lived in Portland a little bit. So I've kind of been all over. I've traveled all over, and I like telling those stories.
So I want to piggyback in there real quick, because I'm curious now, on the other hand, like when your guys are having your show, what drives the most engagement? Like, does local sports drive engagement from the listeners, or does it not?
I think that there is an absolute audience for it, because I mean, I don't know how many times we field calls after we do an interview with someone like, Joe MP McCauley, like, wow, thank you guys for doing this, so I think that there is a big audience for it. I think there's more than people give it credit for. And just because they might not call in doesn't mean that they're not listening. Again, kind of what Jeff said. I remember when I was in high school playing soccer for Portland, my favorite thing used to be seeing my name in the newspaper. Right. So it's the same thing for these high school kids. I mean, you're so excited. Oh, my God, I'm on the radio. It brings life to a community. It gets community excited. Oh, they're talking about our basketball team. Like, that's on a national syndicated radio. You know what I mean? It's exciting. It brings excitement to the community. So even if I don't think you can necessarily see on Twitter, you don't really see maybe much engagement from it, you might not get many calls, but it's there. And I know it's there. And you can just see it just from being that kind of kid in high school and knowing how much it meant to just see your name or hear it on the radio. I think people really embrace it. And I think parents love it too. Hearing your kid be talked about on the Big Jab is you got to be a proud dad. So, again, I think that as much as maybe people are kind of reluctant to say there is an audience for that in soccer, there is. Even if they don't make it notice, there's one. So you have to continue to drive that home and believe in it, because I know it's there. Even if it doesn't show up on Twitter in the likes, or it doesn't show up in the phone calls every Saturday, it's there, and it's a market that can't be ignored.
Yeah, as for biggest areas of engagement, I mean, I think it kind of depends on the time of year. Certainly, I mean, when the Red Sox are in, that's really what drives us. When it comes to engagement and calls and that sort of thing, people are Red Sox crazy here. We know that. I've noticed an awful lot of calls and engagement too lately on the Celtics, more so than the Patriots even right now. I think the Celtics are a little bit bigger of a driver of engagement and calls right now, and even texts, than the Patriots. Which is kind of interesting. And I think because of my own background, we get a fair amount of hockey calls too. It seems like there's at least one a week, even during the off season.
Yeah. And they always asking you too, like, hey, Jeff, I got this hockey question for you. I'm like, I don't blame him. This guy's a walking encyclopedia for the NHL.
Thank you.
So with that, like with having that, like knowing what drives and what you have as important, like how do you turn that into your show? Like how do you split up what you're going to do if you know that you're going to want some callers and you know that talking about high school basketball might not get some callers? How do you run those segments? How do you know when to put them in your show? How do you know when they should stop? How do you know how long they should go?
I think a lot of times it's interesting because I'll look at my brother, especially after we'll go to commercial break, and I think we do a lot of that. Like we'll look at each other and say, yo, we got to piggyback with that. Like, let's talk about this, or, hey, let's jump to this, because you just hear those calls. Like we got to stick on that. I mean, that's what a lot of it is, I think, is kind of reading the room, understanding what your audience is at that day. Because again, he says, some days you get Celtics calls, next day, dude, you're fielding Cam Newton calls for like 2 hours. You know what I mean? So it's just, you got to read the room and be able to adjust on the fly. And I think me and my brother do that really, really well. Just being able to communicate during the show and say, hey, what's the vibe right now? Like, what are people into? Maybe we should switch it up. Let's squash that. Let's not talk about that. I just think we do a really good job of communicating that during the show. And that's one way that we can kind of keep it flowing, is definitely reading the room.
Yeah, that's one thing I'll say. I don't think we necessarily have a set plan for how we're going to do every show necessarily. I mean, we have our segments where they go, but, our recurring segments anyway, they always have a spot every week where they go. The Soccer 30s, 7:15 in the morning. Mannix versus Mannix is at the end of the show. But other than that, we pretty much kind of plan around interview times and around what the kind of the big topic is. And having a show only once a week, we do kind of get to hone that take a little bit. We get to, kind of think about, something that maybe happened on a Sunday that you might think differently about if you were in there the next day and talking about it, than having 6 days separation and really getting to kind of digest everything that's happened there, because sometimes your opinions do change on that. And, we do kind of, it's kind of all about reading the room, what texts we're getting in, and, what kind of calls we're getting initially. That does kind of take us in different directions sometimes, and that's fine. I think having the show the way we have it kind of does provide the ultimate flexibility for us to be able to kind of go wherever callers take us, or to go wherever one of our conversations take us.
And to be fair, if there's, like, for instance, the Celtics are on Friday night, we're talking Celtics. Like, that's 100% the topic. Like, that's a mass, like, we're hitting that, so, there are 100% times where we don't, it's just known, hey, Celtics are on Friday night, Patriots are on Sunday. We got to talk about that. It's the most relevant. So there's also that. You're just kind of understanding the schedules of things and realizing, hey, it's Celtics played the Nets last night, bro. Like, we know we're taking Kyrie calls.
Absolutely. Plenty of those. Jeff and Taylor, thanks so much for joining us on this. And obviously,
appreciate it.
You can listen to them on Saturday mornings in the Big Jab 96.3 in Portland, 7 to 11. And they love engagement. I know they enjoy when people call and like to argue with, or at least I like to argue with Taylor mostly on the show.
Hey, man, I love our conversations, bro. Never get it twisted, man. And I'm still, the jury's still out on Greg Monroe for me.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get Liam's take on this. So I said Greg Monroe at his peak was like just as good as Tristan Thompson. Am I wrong?
I think you're right. Honestly, I think you're right.
Looking at the numbers, bro, you make a great point, man. Numbers don't lie, and you're nailing, dude. When you send me those stats, I'm like, all right, bro, Greg's on to something with this one.
Yeah, Monroe was putting up like 20 and 10 for a little while. Honestly, he was a fringe all-star.
Yeah.
Well, I remember him at Georgetown mostly, so that was where my Greg Monroe memories come from. Is him playing in college.
Yeah, that was my best take of the year. Honestly.
I think
I loved it, man. You nailed it.
Definitely a better game than Tristan Thompson. More skilled around the rim. I'll say that.
This was 20 years ago. Greg Monroe would be way better. But anyway.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't fit in this NBA.
No, not at all. The Moose don't work in the NBA. They work here in the game, though. But, all right, guys. Thanks so much, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.